It's always a bit risky talking about raw because it can cause quite a bit of controversy. So the approach that I've always taken is I just want to provide people with information and my personal experience and encourage people to be skeptical, to ask their own questions, and to choose what works best for their own dog versus me trying to preach, because that I don't like it when people preach to me. I think that was my biggest problem with raw when I was doing the research, is that it seemed too preachy. People were shoving it down my throat too aggressively, and it turned me off. To be frank, I was very suspicious of them. But once I started doing my own research, I converted myself. And that's another tidbit I would give you, is to convert yourself. So if you are unsure, find the answers for yourself and whatever works for you and your dog. This has been empowering, not being preached to, but able to think about what's best for me, all of us, and to do for our dogs. That's kind of what, like I said, like that's what turned me off of raw initially, is that so many people were telling me, like, oh, you just have to do it. They weren't explaining themselves. They were making me feel guilty for feeding my dog something, and it was just a case of like I don't know. Like, it's not like it's common knowledge, but if you want to help fellow dog lovers out there, first you have to respect that it's their choice what they feed their dog. It's not a form of abuse to give your dog kibble or table scraps or whatever else. I mean, as long as they're getting the nutrition that they need, you know, it's fine. Going to spend the next several weeks, months researching, then start by year end. I have 2 Cavaliers, 4 and 5 almost. We do cooked, fresh, never kibble. Research is a really good thing. And I encourage skepticism, and I encourage research. I would say, as part of your research, to trial a prepared raw food. And if you're very ambitious as part of your research, I would go to the length of preparing your own raw food as part of your research. So part of research is trying different things out for I would say at least 2 weeks would be the minimum I would recommend if you're going to try something, because that's part of research, is trying something out. Do you stick to one protein at a time, or you give mixed protein meals? That's an interesting question. Usually I mix in the meals with the organs. So for example, I'll have a base protein of chicken, and that's going to have the chicken bones, and the chicken muscle meat. To add variety to that particular diet, I wouldn't go with then chicken organs. I would say I use like a beef liver, pork liver, and then like a different kidney from a different animal, and I mix it up that way. And then I'll mix up the proteins as well, like on the next cycle. But I have done both. And again, when you're talking about having your own raw diet and making it at home, it gives you that type of flexibility to say, okay, I'm going to try a half chicken, half beef mix at the same time. And then the next time I'm going to go all beef, or the next time I'm going to go all chicken. You know, those things are up to you. You have that type of flexibility when you do that kind of thing. But I don't think it's a big deal either way. Feeding frozen or cold makes my dog's eyes leaky, so I try closer to room temperature. That's great. So one of the other big benefits of going raw, especially when you go homemade raw, is that you're very in tune to your dog. You're very much aware of how it's impacting them, how their poops are changing from day to day, week to week, and you're you're noticing the correlations between what you're feeding them and how they're feeling and how they're acting and that kind of thing. So that's fantastic to make that adjustment. And that's, Kristen, that's one of the adjustments that works for you and your dog, which nobody can tell you one way is better than the other. And that's a perfect example of customizing for your own dog. Even if it's store-bought raw, you're still customizing in terms of adding that flexibility. I often wonder about pork. Humans need to eat cooked pork, but dogs can eat raw pork. Please help me understand that. Okay. We're a different species. So dogs have a much, much different physiology than humans do. And their genetics were built on a much different set of rules. So dogs are actually more scavengers than hunters. You know, when people think of dogs, the image that comes into their head is a bit like a wolf that's hunting down a deer. And in reality, dogs are much more scavengers, meaning that they're much more likely to find a dead animal and eat it versus hunting one down. So the amount of decomposition that they can handle is much, much higher than a person. So our physiology is much, much different. Our digestive system is much different. So that's why dogs can handle different things that would make us sick, and we can't. Dogs' acid levels are much higher, so they're able to handle different bacteria than we are. See, there's a great, thank you, Lindy. I didn't know that. Like, I know dogs have a much shorter digestive system than we do, but that's a good answer. Actually, for a biologist, dogs are wolves, Claudia says. Not me. I'm reading this. They're just different. They're outside, but they can reproduce between each other and had fertile offspring. So in biology terms, they're the same species. I would say that it's not a huge leap to say that wolves and dogs share quite a bit in common. And if we're looking for what is the closest thing in nature that is still wild to this day that resembles our domesticated dogs, wolves are the closest thing. Oh, you're a biologist. Okay. Well, Claudia would know because she's a biologist. So I take Claudia's word for it. When you talk about a dog's health, there's more to it than just their diet, right? So you can have a super healthy diet, but have a completely sedentary dog. That's not good for them either. So I take a much more like holistic approach to how I view my dog's health. And that's my personal opinion. It's just the way I choose to look at their health. So I value exercise and low stress levels and fulfilling my dog's needs in other ways other than just their diet. So yes, diet is a huge component. It's massive. I would say the next biggest one is their activity levels, and then you can get into the more behavioral stuff. There's much more to a dog's health other than their diet. Good. These are really good questions. Some of these make my head go like that. I tried to get a vet to come on my podcast to talk about nutrition, and I couldn't find one. It's so controversial when it comes to vets. They don't tend to want to talk about it. Because I have friends that are vets. I love vets. I love my vet. I have an awesome vet. It's because they don't get paid to promote raw feeding. Just had this combo with my vet last week. Started there. They do not sell any food there, FYI. She said she feeds her dogs Purina Pro Plan and adds supplements. Dogs aren't wolves. That's true. Dogs are not wolves, like humans are not primates, but they are the closest thing to a wild counterpart that they have. So if you think about how people treat dogs like other people, it's probably better to talk to them like, so how do you make an equivalent comparison? Maybe instead of using wolves as an example, you can use street dogs. So street dogs don't get kibble and they survive. And they do things like scavenge and eat garbage and find roadkill and the rest of it. I'm a big fan of making your own raw diet. So I would encourage any of you out there who are enjoying raw food in general to give it a shot. Try it for, I would say, anywhere between 2 weeks to a month. It is a bit of work, but anything that you're passionate about is not work at all. So I actually really find it therapeutic to see the fruits of my labor and to spend an hour or two a week preparing my dog's meals for them, just because they bring so much joy to my life and it's not a huge investment of time. I love it. My dog loves it, although I could use a really big freezer. Oh, I have a trick for that, actually. So I have a regular sized freezer, and even me being the only person who uses that freezer, I still run out of space. So here's a little tip. Sometimes when I'm out of freezer space, I'll take some of the stuff that's in the freezer, put it in the fridge for a few days. It'll stay frozen, and then just rotate it through until I have enough space. And then that way you can avoid buying your own dedicated freezer. But yeah, I mean, a couple $100, I think, from Best Buy or Canadian Tire or something like that can buy you a small fridge. Nice trick. Yes, thanks, Kristen. I'm full of tricks. Once you get into the routine of making your own raw diet, you find tons of shortcuts, tons of little tips and tricks and little ways to get around the challenges that you face. As soon as people find out that you're making your own raw, first they might look at you funny and be like, ooh, you're a little bit of a dog nut. But then they soon understand once they see it. I pulled out a portion that I had in my freezer for my dogs, and one of my friends saw it and was like, that looks so good. What is that? And I'm like, oh, this is my dog's meal. Oh, God, that's great. We're 4 months in, and my boy is doing great, or done great. Fantastic. Fantastic. Does everybody love how tiny the poops are, or is it just me? Because honestly, like, I know we talked about challenges today, but the biggest upside and the thing that I love about it the most, the thing that, impacts your day-to-day life. I mean, I live in downtown Toronto, so picking up poop is mandatory, but holy crap, like going from kibble to raw, and I was just like, holy crap, this is the best thing ever. It doesn't stink. It's nice and solid, and it's tiny. And I mean tiny. Amen to that. Namaste. Once I saw the coat and energy level, I will never look back. Oh, yeah. Like, my dog's fur is like velvet. It's so soft and smooth and lovely and shiny. It's night and day. What are your favorite organ meats? Karen, coming through with the last minute question. I love it. So my favorite liver is what I use for like pretty much 50% of my organ meats. Kidney is my second favorite, followed by, I would say, green tripe. Those are like the big ones because they're good for volume. But I also dehydrate liver and kidney as dog treats. Do you want to see? Because I have some. So you consider tripe an organ. I think the formal definition of an organ when it comes to raw diets is it's a secretion. It secretes something. So I think it's considered an organ. I always consider it an organ. I know that heart, for example, isn't an organ, but it's a different type of muscle meat that's really good nutrition-wise for the purposes of a raw diet. Anyway, do you guys want to see the treats that I've been dehydrating in my closet here? So this is another option when it comes to how you feed your dog organ meat. This gives it a different texture. So this is just a very simple, cheap dehydrator. So part of the reason why I do this, A, is because it's a treat for the dogs. You can see the texture is crunchy, but it's still kind of chewy. And it's just a different way to feed organs to your dogs. So a couple days in the dehydrator, and you get these. Well, hold on. These. Very inexpensive to make, very easy to make, and another way of feeding your dogs organs. You need to try that, but in the oven. Yes, that's the first way I made it. I made it in the oven first, and then I bit the bullet and bought a cheap dehydrator. It was on sale for like $60. So you can see, like, the dogs love it. So if I were to give them this raw, they would love it too. Don't get me wrong. But because it's a different texture, it's kind of crunchy. So this is liver. It's like kind of crunchy, so they enjoy it. So now I need to buy a grinder and a dehydrator. No, you don't. You don't need to buy anything. I don't have a grinder. I used my blender at first, and then I went to a cleaver. I don't recommend that for beginners, but a cleaver makes short work of meat, and it goes through bone. But yeah, dehydrator is great because I can make these trays. I think there's like 5 or 6 trays. You can put easily a couple pounds of whatever. So I put chicken breast, like literally you can put like anything in here and make it into a treat for your dog. So I do everything myself. I'm a bit once you go down the path of making your own raw diet for your dogs, you kind of like, oh, what about this? What about treats, right? Like, I'd like to make my own treats. And at first I would just give my dogs like raw pieces of whatever as a treat. But the beauty of dehydrating it is that it preserves it really well, and it changes the texture. So yeah. So it's still kind of chewy, but it's kind of crunchy. So it's just something different for the dogs in terms of like adding a bit of crunch. Yeah, dehydrator is great. If you look at how much treats cost, and I mean like single ingredient, high quality treats, they're super expensive. So, I mean, for me, buying a dehydrator was like, okay, this is like I'm going to recoup these costs super fast. So not only is it economical, but again, you know exactly what your dogs are getting and how they're getting it. I think somebody asked earlier about feeding things separately. When I feed them these, I won't give them organs in their regular diet. So these are the organs that I give them sometimes. Good. Any other questions? Thank you guys so much for your participation, your attention, and just taking such an active interest in your dog's diet. It's very close to my heart, and obviously you guys are here to spend the time, so I appreciate you listening to me babble on for as long as I have. Eileen and Audrey, thank you so much for participating. It makes me feel really good to be able to share this type of information. And if I can spark just one person to try it and to make their own raw diet, if you're already feeding raw, that's the next challenge that I would pose to you, is to give it a go, to make your own raw. Ooh, you're gonna love it. Hey, baby. This is Kenzie. There we go. And Mosley. Mosley is my older dog. This is my younger dog. She's complaining because I'm sitting at my desk instead of playing with them, and it's the weekend. You getting a bum scratch, Kens? Want some to eat? Kens? Do you want some kibble? No? So there you go. Heard it straight from my dogs. This is my old man. He's almost 14. Hey, Mosley? Good boy. You're almost 14. Do you want to say hi? No. Kels? Want something to eat? Thank you very much. Bye. So Kenzie says bye. Okay. Say bye, Kens. Okay. Bye, everybody. Thank you so much for your time. Good luck.